With the sound that you wanted to go for with this new record, what doors did exploring that through a collaboration as opposed to a solo effort open up for you?
A lot, really, I guess, because I've never made a collaborative album as Fake Graph, and for the last quite a few years I've just been making music, well, in collaboration with producers, but not like writers as well, I suppose. And Tarquin is, a producer as well as a writer, and we really just kind of, put all of both of us into it. So yeah, I mean, like, it was great because the exact reason why I wanted to do it with him is because I really liked his stuff and I was intrigued as to what we could do together. And yeah, he's very into exploring a lot of different styles and ways of doing things. So yeah, I would say all kinds of doors were flung open.
Because you knew each other since you were teenagers, right?
Yeah, we met at sixth form college. We were on the same music tech course, I think. So we met when we were like 18, but we only sort of properly started hanging out a lot and making music together much later in 2019 when we started doing what became the album. But yeah, we were kind of, aware of what each other were up to and like in touch every now and then before that.
What parallels did you see with him as a teenager compared to now? What still remained the same? Had you kept in touch over the years, or had you kind of lost a little bit?
Yeah, like I say, we were in touch very infrequently and like would occasionally bump into each other. Like I remember I was at a place once and he just happened to be DJing, or like I noticed that he would release a new track and then I would like it or play it or whatever. But yeah, in terms of how he changed, I don't know. To be honest, it was kind of like, it was almost like meeting someone new, because our interaction was so long before and relatively fleeting. Even though we were friends, but like we were never like super close.
Like friends.
Yeah, exactly. But we always got on, and like it was always fun when we would see each other. But going from that like occasional kind of interaction to being in the same room with someone all day, working on something very like, personal to both of you, is like, it's just a very different experience. So, but no, I think, yeah, he's always been quite a like reserved, pretty chill guy, which I think is quite a good, goes quite well with me because I'm a bit more like
frenetic.
Yeah, a bit more scatty. So yeah.
That's a really interesting idea, though, what you're saying there about your personality being slightly frenetic or slightly scatterbrained. Because the thing about this album is that it feels like it has a very strong, cohesive sound the whole way through.
Oh, I'm glad you think so.
Where do you see that side to your personality manifesting itself in the music at large, then?
Yeah, I don't even know if it necessarily. Ironically, I think Dave Tarquin, let's call him Tarquin, is probably more musically frenetic, and he's more like no boundaries sort of thing. So maybe that. I'm glad you think it's consistent, but I think there are quite a few different sounds and approaches on it. But I think we were both quite. And yeah, I'm glad it sounds like consistent, because I think that the approach, or like we didn't really have like a set sound that we were going for or anything like that. I think there inevitably were some, consistencies that cropped up, but I don't think we were like limiting ourselves at all. I feel like I've gone off on a tangent, but
I mean, I feel like it's an aesthetically cohesive record, but from a maybe thematic and definitely emotional point of view, you're kind of pulling in a lot of different directions, more so.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
It's interesting to me too that Meaningless Things was the first single you released from the project, but also the last song on the record. What qualities make that song well suited to the introduction to this new collaboration, and what qualities make it well suited to being the closer for the record?
That's a really good question. I think that we knew it would be the last song before we knew it was the first song. So I think that it's a very, after quite a hectic album that kind of blasts by and a little bit, it was just nice to have that kind of peaceful, much more peaceful, slow thing as a sort of closer. But we then realised that it also works really well as like kind of a bit of a teaser track, I guess, as well. That doesn't necessarily indicate what the rest of the album's going to sound like. And I think we also like, because I did a piano album before, Waltz, and I think we kind of like the fact that it's sort of continued on from that.
It almost feels like a song that you would have written for Waltz, but in the soundscape of the new album.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, it was kind of just written like in quite a organic way, but yeah, for some reason, I think it was the first summer we were making music, and I was away, and we were chatting a lot, and we had a lot of stuff that we'd already worked on, and I wrote it when I was in Gothenburg at a festival, and it just kind of popped into my head. And I think, yeah, because we were very in the midst of working together, I was like, okay, let's try this with Dave, because AKA Tarquin. I'll refer to him as Tarquin. Yeah, I think it kind of worked in that sense. And yeah, it was just at a time when we were making a lot of music together, and I liked the idea of seeing what Dave could do with a more traditional song. Yeah.
You mentioned the fact that the album kind of blasts past too. I mean, I think it's 10 tracks in 27 minutes, or just under a half hour, maybe 29 or something.
Yes, yeah, the vinyl version has an extra track, which we omitted from the digital version. So I think that one's like just over 30 minutes, but yeah.
At what point does the pace of the album start to take shape in that way? And once you begin to have a hold of it, how does that impact the direction that you take it on from there?
I guess. Do you mean at which point does it start to kind of speed by?
I mean more so you kind of start to get a sense of the pace of the album at large during the process, and how it's kind of going to flow and feel.
In making it?
Yeah.
I don't really know. I mean, we kind of made it in bursts. So I think like at the beginning when we first started doing stuff together, we suddenly had quite a lot of music, and then we sat on it for a bit, and then because I was away quite a lot, and it was kind of put on ice, excuse the song reference, for a bit. But I think when we were doing stuff, it was going quite quickly, and like some of the tracks, like So Good, for example, it was literally like he passed the beat to me, I came up with like the song essentially, and then he basically just made it sound like it sounds, and that was it. So it kind of, when we were making things, it was happening quite quickly, and like the music was often quite up tempo and had this like energy to it, I suppose. So yeah, I think that was a bit of a sort of running theme, was that sort of like pace to it.
One of the other things I wanted to ask about is the way that the beat and the vocals kind of interweave with each other. And you know, sometimes it kind of feels like one is resting on top of the other, and then they kind of reverse and they go in and out. Again, kind of similar to what I was asking about the pace, at what point do you get a feel for that, and how do you develop that consciously? Was that always kind of a case from the beginning, or how did the way that those two elements interweave with each other develop throughout the process?
It's a good question. Kind of varied from track to track, because like some of the songs were, you know, started from my end, and some of the songs, like So Good, for example, I very much wrote to the beat. So
Tell me what gives it its poppy quality too.
I guess so, yeah. Maybe there's, I mean, I guess it's quite like, yeah, it's rhythmic music. Obviously, Dave Tarquin makes dance music, so there was that element to it, and I think we definitely wanted to try and see what my songwriting with that kind of production and aesthetic would sound like. And I, you know, with my stuff, I essentially write pop songs, so I guess, yeah, I guess it just ended up being pretty poppy. Well, we thought it sounded quite poppy. I don't know. I think it's probably weirder than we thought it was, maybe. But yeah.
One of the things that is very weird is the cover art, and the cover art to the singles throughout. How would you articulate the relationship between those visual images and that aesthetic you were going for with the music itself?
Well, the artwork was done by a guy called Doug Stewart, who Dave Tarquin had worked with before on like a music video, and some of his own artwork as well for his releases. And we basically we sent him the album and gave him some of the, at that point the album was kind of getting to its final form in terms of song selection and stuff, and completion in general. And we kind of just, Doug kind of came up with the concept based on the things that we told him, and the lyrics that we sent him, and what we felt like were the themes that were cropping up, and the aesthetic of the music has this kind of like sometimes quite like icy feeling to it, and obviously there's a song called Ice, and there's quite a lot of reference to the natural world, I guess, not in a very specific way, but it just seemed to keep cropping up throughout the album. So yeah, he kind of ran with that and came up with this idea of doing the frozen flowers, which is what they are.
I didn't realise that.
Yeah, they're frozen flowers. Yeah. I'm glad you didn't realise actually.
I had no idea. I almost thought it was something like a really kind of microscopic close-up of some part of the human body or something.
Yeah, some of them are pretty ended up quite graphic and weird. Yeah.
It's very visceral, yeah.
It is visceral, yeah. And actually, there were quite a few photos that it was more evident that it was frozen flowers, but we ended up all as a sort of team gravitating more towards the ones that were, because he used a macro lens, the ones that were very zoomed in and that ended up looking more abstract. I think the most zoomed out one was the album cover, so that's why we were kind of like, okay, we'll kind of give it away here, but everything else is pretty abstract, and yeah, evokes all of these different things that aren't really flowers. But yeah.
Are there any sides to yourself that you feel are present in this record that haven't been present in your music up until this point? Any aspects of yourself?
I think. I don't know really. I think that, I guess when you're making something that you're putting quite a lot of yourself into something, and if you're collaborating, and even when you're writing by yourself, like making music, I guess, is a very reactive process. So I think inevitably, because of the fact that me and Tarquin made it together, there was, it's definitely true that there are things that would come out, that have come out, that wouldn't have if I was doing it by myself. What those specific things are,
hard to put your finger on.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, kind of. I think maybe there's a bit more of a tendency to be, maybe it's sometimes a bit more abstract and playful, I guess. Something I'd like to try and do more, really. I did after, when the album was done, I did end up being, because I always liked the idea of making music that's playful and doesn't take itself too seriously, or that isn't too overwrought with emotion, but it ended up being pretty emotional anyway. But yeah, I think there was some just because of reacting to the music, I think there was some different lyrical and melodic things that happened maybe. But in terms of aspects of my personality or character, I'm not really sure.
I mean, I guess if we look at an album like Dining Alone, it very much looks at the modern world and where we're at as a society. Whereas, like you were saying, this album, you kind of come back to more timeless classic images like the nature thing and stuff like that. Kind of the inverse of each other slightly. Still songs about yourself, but kind of using different reference points.
Maybe. Yeah, I guess so. I think maybe the album that Tarquin and I made together is has a bit more of a wider scope as well, though, because I think that there are probably some quite specific, more modern references. There's a lyric about leaving someone's message being seen or something like that, which I don't think I've ever done something that specifically on the nose before, maybe. But there's also much more. There's some more sort of throwbacky, natural stuff that I guess is a bit more timeless.